Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I hope you could have heard what was just going on before we started. My name is Jacek Smolicki, and together with Tim Shaw, I'm one of the co-founders and co-curators of the Walking Festival of Sound. And today we have a pleasure to welcome Johanna Steindorf, who will be talking about her practice of sound walking. But before we move on to Tim, who will present Johanna more thoroughly, I just wanted to say a few words about the festival for those who are not familiar with it. I hope you are all familiar, but just in case, the Walking Festival of Sound is a transdisciplinary event that unites people who work with listening and walking as kind of major media in their practice. And by practice, I mean both artistic endeavors, but also more scholarly or research-oriented ones. And we are interested in creating a space, a gathering spot for people from those different disciplines who are united by the interest in walking and listening. And through diverse events, such as artist talks or artist walks, as we like to call them, we try to kind of highlight that territory and invite people to engage in a dialogue. And in 2019, we had two editions of the festival that took place in Newcastle and Stockholm. In 2020, we were supposed to have two other editions, but because of the pandemic, we were forced to move them to 2021 this year. And of course, because of the continuation of this pandemic, we were forced to move the festival to the online sphere. So between the 5th and the 25th of April, we will have a range of diverse events taking place online and encouraging people to actually also move away from the cybersphere and engage in their local environments in different kinds of soundwalking practices. We'll have program published hopefully within a week or so. It's being shaped as we speak. But today, at the end of the talk, we'll introduce first four artists or speakers who will be presenting their work during the festival. I won't say much. It's time to introduce Johanna. Please, Tim, microphone is yours.
Thank you, Jacek, and welcome everybody to I think this the third or fourth, I've lost count, artist walks that we're doing as part of the Walking Festival of Sound this year. As Jacek said, we've had to move the majority of our events online, but it's great to see so many people here and so many people engaging with it. We really appreciate it. So without further ado, I will welcome our artist for tonight, which is Johanna Steindorf. Johanna is a Brazilian and German media artist. She works with participative performances, audio, photography, and video. Often using narrative and mobile strategies, her works deal with the subject of migration, nomadism, gender, and walking. She holds a bachelor degree from PUC-Rio de Janeiro in visual communication, a diploma from the Academy of Media Arts in Cologne, and a Ph.D. from the Bauhaus-University. Johanna has been teaching regularly at different universities since 2015. So I will now pass the word over to Johanna. Let me add this pin for you. Hello, Johanna.
Hi.
I hope that introduction was okay and not too formal.
No,
welcome. I will now pass the word over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you once again to Tim and Jacek for the kind invitation to do this artist talk today. For me, it's always a very unusual format still, as though we have been working so much with Zoom, it's still strange to have a completely invisible audience. So I'll try to do my best and address a topic that I think, everyone can relate, which is how our perception of spaces has changed through this experience of the COVID-19 pandemic and all of the repercussions it's had on our daily lives. Let me share a screen with you. Okay. I will also send this link to this Padlet at the end of my talk, so you can have a look at the different references. And I also invite you to do any of my audio walks. You can find them either on this Padlet directly or linked on SoundCloud, where you can find me if you look for my name. So if you feel like having a more in-depth experience of the audio walks, it would be great if you want to take a walk outside and listen to them. Yeah, as I was saying, I want to address only one topic of this very complex situation which we are dealing with at the moment, which concerns how our experience of public space and also of the domestic environment has changed over the course of now a year for some of us, a little bit less of a year for others, depending on where you're at the moment. And what I want to argue is that this shift in perspective also brings an opportunity in a way. Though there are many challenges, there are also many opportunities, and also you can see a lot of interest resurfacing or becoming stronger in practices of walking and sound walking. And I think this shows how this new experience, this new situation is also making us aware of our surroundings and making us also value the possibility of taking a walk. So I would like to begin my talk with a book I stumbled upon some time ago, which is called The Journey Around My Room by Xavier de Maistre. And why I found it interesting, this book, is that it's the story of, well, a soldier in the 17th century who was placed in house arrest for 42 days. And then he describes this journey around his room. Very meticulously, very playfully, he goes about the different aspects of the room and all of that. And I thought that is something that we now, after having been in lockdown, depending on where you are at in the world, but most of us have either dealt with having to stay at home a lot or not being able to go outside at all. And how we experience the domestic environment has also changed. But what I think is interesting about the Maitre's account is that his experience is shaped by the experience that he had in the world. So he can only start to develop this journey around his room because he has been outside. So his experience of the domestic place is shaped by his experience in urban space and in the world. And also we are talking about a white middle-class man, and many centuries ago, but still his house arrest was in a situation in which he was very well taken care of. So he didn't have to worry about anything. And then I come to a next aspect or a next text that I wanted to take as a starting point to discuss the different ideas, which is a rather popular essay by by Virginia Woolf, which is called A Room of One's Own. And again, it's talking about space in a sense. In the first place, we think of physical environment, but what Rebecca Solnit points out in Wanderlust is that a room of one's own is not only about having an office in your domestic space. It's not about having a home office in that sense, but it also talks about space in a more broad and metaphorical way. So she is saying that it in fact deals with economics, with education, and with access to public space as equally necessary to making art. So while when we think of a room of one's own, we are thinking of enclosed spaces, it's actually also talking about the urban space and the access to urban space, which is the way I connect to the next essay by Virginia Woolf, which is called Street Haunting, where the protagonist describes how she leaves the comfort of her own home, where she leaves her identity, all of that which in one way comforts her, makes her feel safe, and she ventures into the streets of London in winter with this excuse to go buy a lead pencil. So in this case, you have a white middle-class female who is going into the streets, and she's living. This text is from 1930, at a time where she still has many restrictions. She faces many restrictions of walking in the streets as a woman of her position. So still we are talking about a privileged position, a person who is going into public space with the freedom that she has to do it. But you see that this excuse that she chooses is something that she feels is necessary for her to be able to walk outside. So we can also relate to this idea of having an excuse to go outside. Many people, for example, in different countries have started to get pets. So they have this excuse of taking them outside in longer times of lockdown, for example. Or in many places where you have lockdowns, you also have this possibility to go outside to take a walk for an hour, which is something that I guess we wouldn't have thought about before, that we would have this restriction on the one hand, but on the other hand, that it would be part of something that is important for us, for mental health and for other reasons, to be able to go outside even for a short while. And the interesting thing about this idea of street haunting is that, as I described before, it's not just about leaving the environment that you feel safe in, but also letting go of all of that which you identify with, which kind of creates also forms of restrictions to the own self, to what we think about ourselves and how we relate to the world. And also the fact of walking on the street, it brings up many aspects which are interesting in the sense that while we are walking, we are spontaneously getting in contact with situations, people, sounds, all of these things that some of them can be controlled and created in a sense when we create a route, but at the same time, many things just spontaneously happen. And through this spontaneity, we have a very rich experience, even if it's just a short walk around our neighborhood. So this is something that, in a sense, is also important, to be able to let go of our identity and to place ourselves in public space. But in order to do so, we must feel a sort of security, sense of security, to be in public space as well. And so I return to Rebecca Solnit, and who describes that walking, I'm just going to read the quote. If walking is a primary cultural act and a crucial way of being in the world, those who have been unable to walk out as far as their feet would take them have been denied not merely exercise or recreation, but a vast portion of their humanity. So on the one hand, we have this domestic environment, which has this huge importance as a place to which to return to shelter in place, as we have been doing so in many countries at least. And at the same time, this necessity of having access to public space, of being able to go outside. And so we have seen all of these problematic aspects. On the one hand, the domestic space, who has been a place in which you have a surge of domestic cases and domestic violence has gone up. On the other hand, you become aware of how important it is to have this location to return to, and also how it relates to our mental health, to have this safe environment, and at the same time, the mental health, how it can be stimulated, or it can be addressed through the fact that we have this freedom to walk outside. And so one aspect, if we are bound to one location, if we are sheltering in place, some of us have also retreated to taking imaginary walks. And this is where I'd like to talk about the first series of works that I've been doing since 2012, which is, in a sense, an imaginary walk in Google Street View. The series is called Present Views on Past Streets. And the starting point was that I was going to do an artist residency in Sardinia, in Sansperate, which is a small town within the island. And I'd never been to the place before, and I was finding it very difficult to relate to location and to find some kind of entry point to talk about it or to do something at the specific location. And in 2012, Google Street View was still quite new. I can't say exactly which year it was first accessible to us, but it was in contrast to how we experience it today, quite new. And so I started to develop some kind of route in this small city of Sansperate in Google Street View. And I started to think of how it would feel to actually be at the location, how it would feel to walk in the sunlight that I was seeing, how it would sound, how I would generally also feel to be there in the sense of the association that I would have, the memories that I would recall when looking at some location that would appear on the screen. And this imaginary walk relates a lot to what Xavier de Maistre was describing in a journey around my room, because this imaginary walk, it is only possible because of my prior experiences in the world. So I am measuring what I see with what I have already experienced before. And so what I did was that I did a video. I used a screen capturing tool to record a video in Google Street View of the route. I used, the starting point was the address that the organizers of this artistic residency had given to me. And what I then did was I took this video with a few commentaries that I made on my experience, or how I imagined my experience to be at the location. And then when I arrived in Sansperate, I used binaural microphones, and I walked the exact same route that I had already planned in Google Street View. So I had the possibility of actualizing this imaginary walk in the real location. The interesting thing about Google Street View is also that these images are taken at a specific point in time. And the imagery that I could find in Google Street View was already a few years old. So some things in the environment had changed. Some things weren't there anymore, or that were related to a specific time within the year they were gone. So it was interesting to see like how the imaginary that I had formed in my mind from all that I had seen on Google Street View, how I was suddenly contrasting that with the real environment in which I was in. So at the end, the video, I add this binaural recording, and you have the video that I pre-recorded in Cologne before going to Sardinia, and you can listen to the commentaries that I also recorded before, and this is added to the binaural recording. So you have different layers of time interacting, and also you can hear that I'm walking through the streets. So it has a lot also to do with embodiment and how important that is to the experience as a whole. And I think that, of course, looking at a video of a location, or even nowadays you have these 4K walks that you can take through different cities around the world. Of course, we know that they lack a lot of the real experience of going to the location, of being there, of hearing the sound, of feeling the temperature, feeling the different, the sunlight, for example, or having these encounters that are spontaneous and not planned for. But still, it can trigger many associations, many memories, and many things in the imagination that can be playful and interesting. So I also used a similar approach for a series of interviews that I did during my PhD, where I interviewed a few women that had recently emigrated to the city of Cologne from different countries. And I interviewed them while we did a tour through Google Street View. And so I asked them to think of a route that could be interesting in their hometown and that they would like to take me along with them, which is actually this video that you can see here. And it was really interesting because, of course, they thought of a meaningful route that they could imagine to show me. And but still, while we were clicking ourselves through Google Street View, many other memories, many other ideas surfaced in their conscious, in their perception. So they could tell me a lot about the location just by looking at different details that they might not have memorized or that they wouldn't have thought would be important for them and for their experience in the city. So this was a really interesting way to use Google Street View in the interview as a way of, well, stimulating the imaginary and also the possibility for us to travel to this location together that we wouldn't be able to travel to, for example, to Australia or to Spain or to Mexico City. And in I think the course of a week or two, I was able to travel with them on these imaginary walks that were mediated through the browser and Google Street View. So this is something that relates to us being at home in the domestic space and being able to do these imaginary walks just as in a journey around my room. But of course, there's also this other aspect of being in space, which relates to being in the city. And this has also changed in this last year because of this invisible threat that we are facing. We don't know when or how we are getting this disease, or we could get this disease. So when we walk out in the streets, we are mostly protected by masks, or most of us are at specific points within our routes at least. And all of the people that we encounter that we don't know, we get in contact with them, with kind of skepticism, just because of the fact that this invisible threat might have affected one of us or both. So this idea of feeling safe in the city has shifted in a significant way, which makes us aware of how our life has changed through this significant change. And this relates a lot to an audio walk that I did in 2011 and that I will, hopefully, I'm still planning it, repeat this year. It's called Still Here, Sometimes There. It was a remote audio walk. And I invited 35 women that I knew personally to participate in this audio walk. They carried out the audio walk simultaneously. And during the walk, they were instructed to start the audio walk at home. They took a walk around their neighborhood for around 10 minutes and were then instructed to go back to their homes. And during this walk, they were also asked to take a few pictures. Some pictures were more abstract, for example, take a picture of the sky above you or something like that. But they were also instructed to take a picture of something that means home to you, and also take a picture of something that reminds you of what you miss the most. I think that if we look at these instructions now, we can also think of, relate to this, because on the one hand, we can think about what do we miss from this time before these restrictions that are happening due to the pandemic have started. What do we miss from our life before? And on the other hand, this concept of what home is has changed a lot, or has been emphasized a lot through sheltering in place and all of that. And the difference between all of our experiences and the women that participate in the audio walk is that they emigrated to a different country. So these questions were referring to their experience of migration. Take a picture of something that means home to you could relate both to the domestic environment in which they are currently living in, or to their hometown that they have left and sometimes don't know when they will be returning to. And also the question, take a picture of something that reminds you what you miss the most, can relate to something that's in the past or that's geographically distant, which is something that we're experiencing as well, like these, how much these geographical distances are felt since it's become more difficult to travel. So I guess one of the things that I think that the pandemic has done is make us aware of, yeah, our vulnerabilities in a sense, but also has the potential of creating an empathy for people who are in specific situations. So when we return to Virginia Woolf, who in Streets of Haunting says, "The sights we see and the sounds we hear now have none of the quality of the past, nor have we any share in the serenity of the person who 6 months ago stood precisely where we stand now." She is actually talking about herself and how she's changed in the course of 6 months, because she's walking in winter and she remembers herself walking in spring or in summer. And now we think back a year ago and still things don't have the same quality as those of the past. And those are many things that were not planned or we could not have foreseen, but which I still argue have this potential of creating an empathy or stronger empathy for that. And so I come to the last work that I would like to present, which is an audio walk that I did in 2015, The Strange Absence of Wandering at Night. And the subject of the audio walk is women, specifically also women of the time in which Virginia Woolf lived and in the 19th century, where you would locate this figure of the flaneur, what strategies they would find to be able to walk in the city during the day, but also at night. And I staged this audio walk at sunset. So the participant or the participants would go into a park at dawn or at sunset when it's starting to get dark. And while they are walking for half an hour and listening to this audio walk, it's getting dark in the environment. And in that time, the content of the audio walk addresses aspects of, on the one hand, the shift of the location, this public urban space, which has one very friendly and inviting and democratic appeal during the day, which is the public park, but at night is charged with very many different connotations that are rather negative. So, and while you're walking and listening to this, you're also listening to different women throughout history who found strategies to be able to walk outside, no matter what the restrictions of their time would be. And the interesting thing is that you as a participant are also placed into the park at dark, in the middle of the park actually, which can be frightening experience depending on your experience beforehand, but at the same time can also make you very much aware of your position in place and how you can take charge, and at the same time also how other people are in vulnerable positions when they are walking outside in the city. And so I think that the audio walk has this potential because the participant is placed into the urban space or into a situation and is actually having to deal with things that spontaneously happen, real situations that are happening around him or her. I think that it has a great potential in creating this empathy towards other people's experiences or towards specific experiences that one might have. And I also like this idea, which is given by Virginia Woolf, is that, of course, the interesting thing about doing an audio walk or taking a walk is that you can return to the comfort of your home after you have finished or when you don't feel as safe anymore and all of that. So as she describes here, I'm going to read it briefly. That is true. To escape is the greatest of pleasures, street haunting in winter the greatest of adventures. Still, as we approach our own doorstep again, it is comforting to feel the old possessions, the old prejudices fold us round. And the self, which has been blown about at so many street corners, which has been battered like a moth at the flame of so many inaccessible lanterns, sheltered and enclosed. So Virginia Woolf describes this pull that she feels at the beginning of this essay, Street Haunting, that she wants to go outside, she wants to let her identity be at rest, the comfort of her home and all of that. So she goes outside, she has many different encounters and many different situations that she observes. And at the end, when she returns to her home, she feels like she's back to this cocoon that is around her, where objects that she knows well surround her, and all of that comfort is very important to her in that sense. And what I would like to finish it with is kind of like a plea, or at least I think that one thing that has made us very empathic through this pandemic is that on the one hand, we have become aware how important the domestic space has become, how important it is to be able to go outside as well, but that these two things that are very strongly connected to each other. So I think that if we keep too much time inside of our homes, we feel that we need to go outside, but one thing always relates to the other in a sense. Yeah, I guess I'd like to finish my talk. I guess that I was a bit quicker than I expected, I'm not sure. Talking about the fact that when we go outside into the streets, one aspect that makes a walk, or also a sound walk, very interesting is the fact that we can become invisible, or we can disappear, and we can concentrate on our own perception. And of course, this invisibility is not possible for everyone. And and also has this dichotomy that if you're visible, you become vulnerable, and sorry. So well, if you're outside and you're taking a walk, this invisibility has this very protective sense. But also being invisible can be something very negative for some people as well. So maybe I'll give my voice a quick rest and let you listen to this short excerpt of A Strange Absence of Wandering at Night. And I'll be glad to answer any questions or to respond to any feedback and all of that in a moment.
I straddle the twin sides of the risk that I'm taking, the vulnerability it creates in me as I place myself in the dark. All those stories of men attacking women in the dark, jumping out from behind bushes. Yet I enjoy the power it gives me to observe unnoticed, to take the position of night walker, of flaneuse. It is only when I feel this agency that I am able to focus solely on what I'm hearing. As I walk, I follow the movements of each person who walks past me, tracking where they go in relationship to me. In front of me, next to me, behind me. She moves lightly through the dark and observes the white shimmering on the surface. This is where she has been told that things begin to change, as they always do when water meets land. Life remains moist. but those who swim here do so in fear of the net. She knows she is close now. To what, you ask? You might not find out. In front of me, next to me, behind me, beyond and within me, darkness. Darkness is as protective as she is possessive. She wraps her arms tightly around our bodies, shielding us from the other's gaze. We become indistinguishable from each other and might even hide within a crowd. But darkness extends the same protective impulse towards the others as well. Can we recognize then who poses a threat to us?
Okay. Thank you for your attention. I'm going to add the link into the chat window. And should you have any questions, I've seen one question in the chat box.
Thank you, Johanna, so much for this wonderful presentation and letting our ears witness your process. Yeah, I think we have one question, but before I will read it, I just, so I don't lose the thought that came to my head. I just wanted to ask you about this quote from Virginia Woolf when she talks about returning to home as this place that is kind of fundamentally unchanged and thus safe in a way. And also, I mean, versus the idea of a sandwalk as something that is supposed to change your perception of the outside world and maybe also the kind of inner world of yours. I mean, for me, this is kind of the most interesting aspect of sandwalking, the fact that the point of departure never equals the point of arrival, that you return from a sandwalk with a slightly augmented perception of where you departed from. And I'm very curious about your thoughts on that, on this transformative power of sandwalking.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's a really good point. Of course, when she returns to the comfort of her home, there is this that she has changed, but the surrounding hasn't. But her perception of it might be different. That's true. But I also think that, or at least in my experience of doing sound walks and audio walks, myself as a participant, but also from the feedback and the experience with participants of audio walks I've done at different events, is that this concentration that you have while doing a sound walk, this experience where you really let yourself be guided by your perception and by different things that are either addressed by a narrator or by some instruction that you receive or whatever, it can really change how you see the environment, even if it's an environment that's very, very familiar to you. So I guess that yes, it has this very transformative power, and at the same time, what I find interesting is that it really gets inscribed in people's memories when they do an audio walk or a sound walk, and going to that location will remind him or her or myself very much of that experience, because it has such a this concentrated kind of sensibility that we are triggering through this practice. Yeah.
Thank you, Johanna. So I'll move to questions that we have on our chat. Kathleen is asking, for the strange half absence of wandering at night, did you also consider the physical aspect of wearing headphones, also being an object that adds a level of vulnerability? For example, someone wearing headphones on the street can look like a target to muggers, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for that question. This was something that I became very much aware of while preparing this audio walk. Because you have like this double vulnerability of being in the dark and then of having headphones. So the ears, which would inform you of some type of predator coming near you, they are kind of like not accessible. So that's something that can be problematic. And I've felt really responsible when doing this audio walk. But what happened during all of the times when the Strange Have Absence was presented is that we were a group of people, and the people left with, I think, an interval of 1 minute each. So you could always see the person who started walking before you. And so it was kind of a chain that was formed. But of course, it creates a huge vulnerability. And I must say that this audio walk was presented in European and Northern European cities and in parks. And for example, when it was presented in Stockholm, one person approached me afterwards and said that she really never thought about that it could be dangerous to walk at night. So I think that this experience is also very specific to where you live and how safe or how much danger there might be on the streets in which you're walking through. But definitely wearing headphones is something that creates vulnerability.
Yeah, exactly. A cat actually is touching upon what you just mentioned. She asks, the way you relate to the unsafety of night streets is very different from my own experience, where I find safety and magic walking in the dark. The dark city, absent of its daily conventions, becomes the room where I find my own. Do you ever have that sort of experience with it, or is night walking always containing the possibility of danger?
Yeah, I think this was a really nice description. Thank you, Kat. Yeah, I grew up in mainly in Latin America, or at least the time where I could walk alone at night was in Mexico City and in Rio de Janeiro. And I wasn't able to, or I didn't feel free enough or safe enough to walk at night and to really enjoy this experience. I think that this started to happen when I moved to Germany in 2006, and I started coming home at 3 o'clock in the morning by myself, and I started to see this. But I was very kind of torn, because on the one hand I thought, wow, this is so nice and this is such a great experience, and on the other hand I thought, well, there might be some danger lurking around the corner. So I guess that this experience that I had of living in countries where it wasn't safe for women walking at night, this never left me. It's like something that drags my heel a little bit. But I can actually really appreciate this idea of walking in the dark as something peaceful and magical in a sense.
Leslie is asking, I really appreciate your writing and wonder if you can speak about the voice, your voice, that the sound walker carries with them through spaces that may be variably risky, beautiful, strange. What role does that voice take in this experience?
Yeah. So yeah, it is my voice. It kind of started that I used my voice because it was like practical. I could record my voice, but it actually like took on something to become something different. But as I was writing the script for the audio walk, I was using references from different authors. I did rather vast research on the subject of women walking in the city and female flaneurs and all of that. And I wanted to use one voice to interweave all of these experiences into one, and to, yeah, in that form, bring all of these experiences together. Yeah, maybe that, I don't know if that answers the question.
Maybe Leslie can write on the chat. Meanwhile, Mark is asking, what is your process of creating your work? What time scale do you work to? Do you write the experience first or create soundscape and music? Do you test and refine your works after audience test walks?
Yeah. I think that with The Strange Half Absence of Wandering at Night, this was the most extensive research that I did. So I took a lot of time researching because I didn't have like a deadline. And afterwards, when I had a deadline, I had like 1 month of developing the audio walk. Usually, when it's a site-specific audio walk, I think that for me, the most important part is always developing the script and then developing the route. So I think that this connection to literature, to text, to narratives is very important for me. And actually developing the route is something that needs a lot of refining afterwards. If you really want people to stand at a specific location while they are listening to some part of the audio walk and all of that. So yes, testing is really an elemental part of my work. I don't know if I could say like, if I have time, I'd say like a month, but it could be quicker to develop an audio walk. It depends a lot on how the time frame is that I get.
Martin, thanks for the great talk. Your use of music creates a mood, as does the choice of texts. Both feel quite cinematic and at least a little suspense generating. How do you decide how you want to use them, and what moods are you interested in?
I guess that for, well, I guess that most of my works have a similar mood, but especially for The Strange Half Absence of Wandering at Night, this mood was important to create a little bit of suspense, also to like, make the situation a bit more cinematic in a sense, because it was really nice to have this moment of seeing how the blue sky turns into black. So I really wanted to create a cinematic experience for the people. In other works, it's more, sometimes the sound is more like illustrating things, or I use field recordings. So you have like these augmented experiences of the space and all of that. But yeah, I guess that in this work, especially this mood of having something a bit like calm, but also with a bit of suspense was important in a sense because of the topic that it addressed.
Thank you, Johanna. Hey, Leslie has a very interesting question, and I was actually going to ask you a little bit about your thoughts on like if there are any places or territories where we should be kind of banned from doing sound walks in. But I will read Leslie's question. I think it's much better formulated. Where I live, northwestern Canada, space is very contested. Whose space? Who has a right to call the territory home, with histories of treaties of unceded territory? Have you created works in spaces where you must question your own, possibly privileged right to claim it as home or safe?
That's an interesting question. Not really. I think that, well, there was one work that I did in Israel. I was invited to do an artist residency there. So if you're talking about territory and that's unceded territory or contested territory, I guess that's one thing that pops into the mind of many people. But I went into the city, which is called Lod, and I developed an audio walk, and it was really difficult for me to have access to the city. In the first place, of course, as a German being in Israel, it was very difficult to have access to really feeling that I could do work there. What was my I found that really difficult. So I started to think of, okay, I wanted to tell, or I want to talk to someone, and that person will tell her story. That was my access to like this contested territory. And so I got in contact really by chance to a woman, a Black woman who had fled as a small child. She had fled with her family from Ethiopia, and she has an interesting story because she lives in this smaller town in Lod. It's close by to Tel Aviv, and she was discovered while she was in the military. She was discovered by The Voice while living in Lod, and So she was discovered by this TV show. She went on a TV show. She became really popular, and that transformed her life really a lot. But it was never planned for. And so I asked her to take me on a walk in Lod, in the city that she was living in. And she developed a route that related to this part of her biography, where she was discovered and how her life changed and all of that. And she took me to a location that was really meaningful for her during that time, which was a community center where they tried to integrate children from many different backgrounds, and in a city that has a lot of conflict. And so this was a way for me to access the city through her narrative, through her biography. And it was actually really nice for me to gain access to her very, very intimate story, and which was connected to music and to the city and all of that. Yeah, but I think it's really interesting about how much access we get to the city, and we as artists, how do we gain access to cities? When do we feel entitled to do so, and when we don't?
Thank you, Johanna. There's one more question by R.L. Wilson. Here in the UK, this is very timely due to recent incident of the darker side of walking for women, which has provoked a much needed dialogue. #AllWomen. And I wonder if you're aware of this.
Of this specific incidents?
I'm not sure.
Really.
Maybe you could specify RL on chat. I assume that if you're aware of this movement.
No, not really. I remember actually The Strange Life Absence of Wandering at Night was created in 2015, and I was doing my PhD research in 2014 with this group of women who had emigrated to Germany, and one of the women was Australian, is an Australian, and she told me at the same time that we were doing these sound walking experiments, we were also doing in the dark. She told me about all of these attacks that were happening in Melbourne and in other cities in Australia, and that made her very frightened. And she was especially triggered, of course, by going into the park at night. So, yeah, I think that the park in general is a location that has this connotation of being a very dangerous, not only for women, but also for women. Okay, no, I didn't know that. The specific case.
Yeah, this is very, very recent in the UK. Unfortunately, she was discovered, her remains were discovered, I think yesterday or the day before, but a woman was abducted while walking home from having a drink with somebody. And that incident, it was sparked a conversation on social media around all of the experiences that women have walking alone at night. And it was a very shocking event, and how many women come forward and say how they would protect themselves, how they keep their keys in their hands in case anybody attacks them, but they take particular routes home that they call friends, all of these strategies that women take when they're navigating a potentially dangerous environment, which is the urban environment which they live. So that's what R.L. Wilson is referring to there.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when these attacks were happening in Australia. It was interesting, or not interesting, but this woman that was participating in the project, she was very angry also in the ways in which it was being dealt with, this problematic, because that this is also a short passage from a radio interview with a police with the speaker of the police. I don't remember, I'm sorry, in which city in Australia, but he was talking to this moderator, and he was saying, well, women just can't go into the park. They have to restrict the movements, or at least the places that they go to. And this moderator was contesting this strategy that he was proposing, in the sense of making those who could be potentially victims to these crimes to make them responsible for them not to be attacked, which is a strategy that is quite, how do you say, quite broadly introduced in many different countries and situations like that.
Kind of following up on that a little bit, Johanna, I was lucky enough to take your walk in Oslo I think 5 years ago in the park, and it was really powerful. And I remember ever since then, I've been thinking of the role of the author in especially that kind of pre-recorded soundwalk compositions. I did a couple of soundwalks of whose intentions were to kind of shake the listener a little bit, and I heard afterwards from the public that if I wasn't there with them, for instance, it would have been completely different experience. There was a sense, even one person mentioned that she felt like she needs someone to talk to kind of immediately after that that soundwalk. And I was wondering what is your opinion about the presence of the creator of the soundwalk? So basically your presence next to those who you invite to oftentimes those very difficult experiences.
Yeah, I think that on the one hand, in the strange half absence of Wandering at Night, I find it really important to be there at the end of the audio walk. On the one hand, I feel this responsibility of like knowing, okay, who has gone into the park and who's returning, but also I always feel that people want to share their experience afterwards. So since it's a sensitive topic to many people, it's something that I feel is super important and rich, and it's not just negative experiences. It's really very different, various different kinds of experiences that people make, and it's always nice to have this moment of informal conversation afterwards, and to kind of like have the possibility for them to give feedback as well. In other situations in which it's not, in that case, since it's a sensitive topic, I think it's important for me to be present. In other situations, I feel it a little bit uncomfortable for me to be there, because usually I'm the narrator, it's my voice that you listen to, and I think that people are more free if they listen to the audio walk without my presence, in the sense. I think it can be kind of like people don't feel as relaxed because I'm there, in a sense.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been thinking about the amount of audio content that we've been living with these days, and the need to develop some kind of strategies and curatorial strategies for what to choose, and also where and how to listen. I think we sometimes forget maybe that some pieces are created for specific positions or specific contexts, and it seems like we take for granted the fact that we can listen everything at any given moment, at any given space. And again, I think I wonder about your approach to site specificity and also time specificity, as in the case of this dusk walk. Can you say a few more words about the importance of those aspects, site and the time specificity?
One thing that fascinates me so much about audio walks is that you can create these cinematic, almost magical moments where you are by yourself with your headphones and your mobile device, and suddenly you're standing exactly where you're supposed to stand, and then you experience something that either happens only on the auditory layer, but that connects to your personal experience or to your environment, or something spontaneously happens and suddenly this situation is transformed. And so I think that can be really nice and really powerful. For example, Strange Half Absence was developed originally for Treptower Park in Berlin, and the moment where it is talked about water, the person is supposed to stand in front of a small lake within the park. So you have like this connection that can be, of course, it can be just the association that you can think of the location, but it's really nice to have like this direct resonance of what you are experiencing and what is happening in the world. That can be really nice. And so, yeah, I think that staging this audio walk in the moment where it starts to get dark, automatically you have this moment, which is something that we experience every day. But since you are in this immersed experience of the audio walk, where you are completely listening, walking, and open to perceiving the environment in a different way, it gets this almost magical quality. And I think that's really important. So when people tell me that they listen to their one audio walk that I've done at home, I'm a little bit disappointed, because on the one hand, I think that being in the environment has all of these qualities, but also of course, you can imagine what it would be like to be walking outside while it's getting dark. We all have this imaginary power, but really being there, it makes all the difference. So I think that this, of course, is a challenge at the moment, where we can't be everywhere we want to be, and also not with more than a few people, at least in Germany at the moment. Yeah, I think that the nice thing is really this transformative power of walking and listening, being it pre-recorded sound or the sound of the environment or something specific that you're instructed to listen to or experience at that moment.
Thank you, Johanna. I don't see any more questions on the chat. If there are any, please pose them now. We don't have much more time. Otherwise, I think we can thank you, Johanna, for this wonderful talk. Thank you so much for telling us so much about your process and your work. There are people thanking you on the chat, as you might see as well.
Yeah, thank you too. Thank you for all of your attention. And and I encourage you to do some audio walks if you like. Yeah. Exactly.
You posted the link. We can maybe post it once more, since it's on the top of the list. Yes, and before we end for tonight, I wanted to just very quickly announce the artist walks that we're planning for April, for our April program. So please bear with me. I will just switch to so as you see, on the 6th of April, we will have Jana Winderen talking about her field recording trips to the Arctic Circle. She will speak mostly about her 2 recent projects. And then on the 9th at 7 p.m, we'll have Barry Truax from the World Soundscape Project talking about the history of acoustic ecology, but also how it has transformed in the last 50 years. On the 15th of April, we'll have Patrick Farmer, who will give a talk about relationship between tinnitus and walking, which sounds already fascinating. And then on the 20th of April, we will have Elena Biselna, scholar and curator, but also sound artist, talking about border soundscapes and how borders sound and what it might imply. So you can follow us on Twitter to learn more about those talks and also other points of our program that we'll be gradually revealing in the next hopefully few weeks. The festival runs already, as you see, with our series of talks, but between the 5th and the 25th of April, we'll have more condensed program of various kinds of events taking place both online and offline. Okay, once again, thank you so much, Johanna. Thank you everyone who attended today, and please stay in touch and keep soundwalking.
Thanks everyone. Thanks Johanna for a fascinating and very timely talk. And yeah, thank you everyone, and stay in touch. I will put the festival website in the chat if you'd like to keep up to date with stuff. And yeah, please join us for the more activities we have planned over the next few weeks, and which intensify in April. So So that concludes the talk. Thank you again to Johanna for a fascinating talk and conversation afterwards. And thanks everybody for joining us. See you all soon.
Good night.
Thank
See you, everyone.